Breaking. Indian Prime Minister Modi just blocked every member of Starmer's cabinet from entering India. British ministers were turned away at Delhi airport just 1 hour ago. The diplomatic crisis is escalating by the minute. And what happened next has triggered emergency meetings at the highest levels of government. Britain now faces its most humiliating international rejection in decades. Global leaders are already distancing themselves from the UK. If you want to understand how Britain became a diplomatic pariah overnight, hit that subscribe button right now, because the mainstream media won't tell you the full story of this unprecedented international catastrophe. Here's what ignited this extraordinary diplomatic explosion. Just 4 hours ago, at 9:17 a.m. Indian time, Foreign Secretary David Lammy landed at Indira Gandhi International Airport in Delhi. His arrival was scheduled. His visit was confirmed. His diplomatic credentials were in order. But when he approached passport control, Indian officials delivered a shocking message. Entry denied by direct order of the Prime Minister's office. Lammy was escorted to a detention room. His phone was confiscated. His diplomatic status was ignored. But the Foreign Secretary wasn't the only target of Modi's stunning action. Within minutes, news broke that International Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, who was arriving on a separate flight, received identical treatment. 2 senior British cabinet ministers stranded in diplomatic limbo, 4,000 miles from home. But the situation was about to get much worse. The exact words of the Indian government's official statement, released exactly 37 minutes after Lammy's detention, have sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles worldwide. The Republic of India hereby suspends all diplomatic engagement with select members of the current British administration due to repeated provocations, colonial attitudes, and disrespect toward Indian sovereignty, the statement declared. It then listed 14 cabinet ministers by name who are now banned from Indian territory, including the Prime Minister himself. When contacted for explanation, Indian Foreign Minister Subramanyam Jaishankar was brutally direct. Britain must learn it can no longer lecture former colonies from a position of imperial arrogance. His voice, according to witnesses, was calm but filled with unmistakable resolve. The era of British condescension toward India is finished. Within minutes, social media erupted. Indian hashtags celebrating the move received over 8 million engagements in just 30 minutes. Britain humbled and Modi stands strong trended simultaneously across South Asia. Meanwhile, Downing Street remained completely silent. No statement, no response, no explanation. The Prime Minister's office, caught entirely off guard, was scrambling for a strategy while Britain's international reputation collapsed in real time. BBC diplomatic correspondent James Landale described it as the most severe diplomatic crisis Britain has faced with a major power since the Falklands War. Former Foreign Secretary William Hague called it a catastrophic breakdown in relations with the world's most populous nation and fastest growing major economy. The diplomatic earthquake had begun, and the aftershocks were already spreading across the globe with stunning speed. Meanwhile, ordinary British citizens with family connections to India are watching in horror as centuries of shared history crumble overnight. Derek Patel, a 67-year-old retired teacher from Leicester, whose grandfather served in the British Indian Army, stood outside the Indian consulate with tears in his eyes. "My family has lived between these two countries for generations," he told reporters, his voice breaking with emotion. "Now I don't know if I can even visit my relatives in Mumbai. What happens to people like us caught in the middle?" His concerns are echoed across Britain's 1.4 million strong Indian diaspora community. In Birmingham's Balti Triangle, restaurant owner Sunita Sharma told local journalists, "I have suppliers, family connections, and business partners in India. This diplomatic crisis could destroy livelihoods built over decades. Community centres in Southall, Wembley and Bradford report being flooded with calls from worried British Indians seeking information. Many have already received notifications that previously approved. Business visas are under review, throwing travel plans, family reunions and commercial arrangements into chaos. The human cost of this diplomatic meltdown is already spreading far beyond Whitehall, affecting tens of thousands of ordinary citizens. While British Indians face devastating personal consequences, the economic impact is sending shockwaves through the City of London. We're talking emergency board meetings at major corporations with Indian investments, plunging share prices for companies dependent on Indian markets, and frantic calls between banking executives and government officials. The London Stock Exchange saw shares in British companies with significant Indian operations drop by an average of 17.8% in just 2 hours of trading. British telecommunications giant Vodafone, which has massive investments in the Indian market, watched its stock price collapse by 23%, wiping 4.7 billion from its market value in a single morning. HSBC, Standard Chartered, and Barclays all suspended trading temporarily due to extreme volatility. The contrast is so stark, so utterly catastrophic, that even traditional Conservative supporters are questioning the government's competence in international relations. In traditional Tory strongholds, Surrey, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, local business associations report members expressing profound concern about Britain's deteriorating global position. Conservative donor and business leader Sir James Merchant publicly condemned the crisis on Radio 4. This government has managed to alienate one of Britain's most crucial post-Brexit trading partners through sheer diplomatic incompetence. The economic consequences will be felt for years. Then something extraordinary happened that nobody anticipated. The King made an unprecedented intervention that shattered royal protocol and stunned political observers. At exactly 11:45 a.m, while cabinet ministers were still scrambling for a coherent response, Buckingham Palace released a statement of extraordinary diplomatic significance. His Majesty has placed a personal telephone call to Prime Minister Modi of India, the statement revealed. The King expressed his deep appreciation for the enduring connections between our nations and conveyed his desire for a swift resolution to current difficulties. Royal experts immediately recognized the seismic implications. The King has effectively bypassed the elected government to conduct foreign policy directly, explained constitutional historian Dr. Margaret Williams on Sky News. This hasn't happened since the early days of Queen Victoria. Charles is signalling that the monarchy must step in where the government has catastrophically failed. The palace statement carefully noted that the call was made with the knowledge of government, but conspicuously omitted the usual phrase, "on the advice of ministers," a distinction with profound constitutional significance. Former Buckingham Palace Communications Director Simon Lewis told BBC News, "This is the monarchy activating its emergency diplomatic channels when official government relations have completely collapsed. It's a damning vote of no confidence in Starmer's administration." Palace sources confirm the King acted after consulting with senior advisers who warned of potentially irreparable damage to Commonwealth relations if the situation continued to deteriorate. His Majesty understood the extraordinary nature of this intervention, a senior royal household official explained. But he also recognised that Britain's standing in Asia was in free fall and required immediate stabilisation. The call reportedly lasted 23 minutes, with Modi showing marked respect and warmth toward the King despite his fury toward the elected government. The optics are devastating for Starmer's administration. While cabinet ministers appear helpless and reactive, the monarchy demonstrates decisive leadership and activates deep historical connections that transcend current political tensions. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams described it as the most significant demonstration of the monarchy's unique diplomatic value in the modern era. Conservative voters are overwhelmingly supporting the royal intervention, but so too are many traditional Labour supporters. Polling conducted by YouGov in the hours after the palace statement shows 76% of the public believe the king was right to intervene directly, while just 14% believe he overstepped his constitutional role. The consequences are now cascading through British politics with breathtaking speed. Financial markets reacted with immediate panic to the diplomatic crisis. The pound plummeted against major currencies, dropping 4.3% against the dollar in just 3 hours. The steepest intraday decline since the 2016 Brexit referendum. The FTSE 100 shed over $62 billion in market capitalisation as investors fled UK assets exposed to Indian markets. Economic analysts warned that Britain's ambitious post-Brexit trade strategy, which positioned India as a crucial alternative to European markets, lies in tatters. Within the government, fragile unity has shattered along multiple fault lines. Cabinet ministers are publicly contradicting each other about the causes of the crisis. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds told Sky News there had been no warning signs of India's action, only to be directly contradicted 30 minutes later by Defence Secretary John Healey, who admitted on BBC that concerns were raised through diplomatic channels over several weeks. The chaos suggests either internal communication has completely broken down, or ministers are deliberately distancing themselves from the unfolding catastrophe. International reactions have only intensified Britain's humiliation. In Washington, White House spokesperson confirmed President Biden has spoken with both Modi and Starmer, but tellingly described the US role as encouraging all parties toward constructive dialogue. Diplomatic language that positions America as a neutral mediator rather than a British ally. Australian Prime Minister Albanese carefully noted that while Australia values its relationship with the UK, we also recognise India's growing importance in the Indo-Pacific region, effectively declining to take sides. Social media platforms have become battlegrounds of national humiliation. Videos of David Lammy being escorted through Delhi airport by security personnel have been viewed over 67 million times globally. Indian users have flooded British government accounts with mocking comments. Twitter analytics show terms relating to British decline and imperial collapse dominating global discussion. The hashtag #BritainIrrelevant trended in 23 countries simultaneously, an unprecedented digital expression of Britain's diminished global standing. Polls reveal the political earthquake in stark numbers. YouGov shows government approval collapsing from 45% to just 29% in 7 hours, the most rapid decline ever recorded by the polling organisation. A Survation poll finds 71% of Britons believe the government has seriously mishandled relations with India. Most devastating for Labour strategists, an Ipsos poll shows 58% of respondents now question Starmer's competence in foreign affairs, including 41% of those who voted Labour in the last election. The Daily Telegraph's political editor called it the most rapid erosion of prime ministerial authority in the modern political era. Former diplomat Lord Ricketts described it as a fundamental collapse of Britain's foreign policy machinery. Even traditionally supportive media outlets have turned hostile. The Guardian's editorial board, usually sympathetic to Labour, published a scathing assessment headlined, "Diplomatic Amateurism, Britain's Global Standing in Freefall." Inside Downing Street, sources describe scenes of complete pandemonium. Ministers are reportedly shouting at civil servants. Special advisors are drafting contradictory statements. Senior officials describe total panic at every level. The Foreign Office has established an emergency response unit operating around the clock, but insiders reveal it has yet to establish contact with senior Indian counterparts, who are refusing all communication through official channels. Cabinet Secretary Simon Case has allegedly told the Prime Minister that this represents a complete breakdown of normal diplomatic machinery with no modern precedent. Foreign Secretary David Lammy, finally permitted to leave Delhi airport after 7 hours in diplomatic limbo, is described by staff as incandescent with fury about his treatment. David feels completely abandoned by Downing Street, revealed one Foreign Office source. He was left stranded while the PM's office failed to even issue a basic statement. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is reportedly deeply concerned about potential repercussions for British nationals in India. Yvette is warning that the situation could escalate to involve restrictions on ordinary citizens, claimed a Home Office insider. She's demanding urgent contingency planning that isn't happening. WhatsApp groups with names like Crisis Response and India Emergency are flooding with increasingly desperate messages from ministers and advisors. Parliamentary private secretaries report unprecedented hostility during constituent engagements, particularly in areas with large British Indian populations. A senior civil servant with direct knowledge of emergency planning described the government as paralysed by shock. They genuinely never imagined India would take such dramatic action. Starmer himself appears increasingly isolated, according to Downing Street insiders. He's cancelled all public appearances, delegated media responses to junior ministers, and reportedly spends hours in closed-door meetings with a dwindling circle of trusted advisors. One staffer claimed to have heard the Prime Minister exclaim, "How the hell did we get here?" during a particularly heated exchange. Another source said he blamed the Foreign Office for catastrophic intelligence failure regarding Indian intentions. The chaos extends beyond Downing Street to Labour campaign headquarters, where strategists are frantically assessing electoral damage in constituencies with significant British Indian populations. We're looking at potentially losing dozens of seats if this crisis isn't resolved, admitted one party official. The political damage is spreading faster than we can track it. But here's the explosive revelation that could permanently destroy Starmer's credibility on the world stage. According to confidential diplomatic cables obtained through extraordinary channels, the Indian government explicitly warned Britain 3 times in the past month that relations were deteriorating to crisis level. Internal Foreign Office memoranda show the Indian High Commissioner to London, Vikram Doraiswamy, requested an urgent meeting with Starmer on 3 separate occasions to discuss grave concerns regarding ministerial statements on Indian domestic affairs. Each request was declined due to scheduling constraints. The final warning came just 72 hours before the diplomatic explosion, when India's Foreign Secretary sent a formal diplomatic note stating, "Continued British interference in India's internal governance will necessitate a significant diplomatic response." This urgent communication was apparently classified as routine by Foreign Office staff and never reached ministerial level. If these documents are authentic, and 3 separate sources have verified their formatting and classification markings, then this wasn't an unpredictable diplomatic ambush. It was a preventable crisis that occurred after multiple explicit warnings were either ignored or bureaucratically mishandled. Think about what that means. Britain's most humiliating international incident in decades wasn't the result of India's unreasonableness, but of stunning diplomatic negligence at the highest levels of government. For millions of voters who believed Labour would restore Britain's international standing, this isn't just disappointing, it represents catastrophic governmental failure. Multiple Westminster sources confirm the authenticity of these explosive documents. Former Foreign Office Permanent Secretary Sir Simon MacDonald stated, "The cable formats, classification markings, and reference numbers are entirely consistent with genuine diplomatic communications." The documents reveal the Foreign Office produced a risk assessment on October 8th, warning that Indian relations were at their most fragile point in decades, and recommended urgent prime ministerial engagement. This assessment was apparently shelved during preparation for a European summit. The political implications are absolutely devastating. It transforms the narrative from an unpredictable diplomatic crisis to a preventable catastrophe resulting from governmental negligence and arrogance. One scenario might eventually be forgiven as bad luck. The other permanently damages Starmer's credibility as a statesman. Meanwhile, opposition leader Rishi Sunak is orchestrating a devastating political counterattack that's gaining extraordinary traction. While Labour ministers hide from cameras, Sunak, Britain's first Prime Minister of Indian heritage, is leveraging his unique personal position to deliver a masterclass in opposition politics. This government has managed to alienate 1.4 billion people in just 6 months, Sunak declared to journalists outside Parliament. They've destroyed decades of careful relationship building with the world's fastest growing major economy through a toxic combination of arrogance and incompetence. Speaking with evident personal emotion, Sunak continued, "As someone proud of both my British and Indian heritage, I find it heartbreaking to see these two great nations, bound by history, culture, language, and shared values, brought to this point of diplomatic collapse. The damage to Britain's global standing and economic prospects is incalculable." The polling tells an extraordinary story of political revival, Labour collapsing to 29%, Conservatives surging to 37%. For a party that suffered historic defeat just months ago, this represents the fastest opposition recovery in modern British history. Conservative associations report membership applications increasing 240% in 48 hours. British Indian voters, traditionally divided in their loyalties, are uniting behind Sunak's unique ability to potentially repair the bilateral relationship. For the first time since the general election, Britain faces the genuine possibility of a dramatic shift in public opinion that could fundamentally reshape the political landscape before Starmer's government has even passed its first significant legislation. The next 48 hours are absolutely critical for Britain's international standing. The National Security Council meets in emergency session tomorrow morning. Cabinet ministers must develop a coherent response strategy after hours of damaging silence. The King must determine whether to continue his extraordinary diplomatic intervention or step back now that he has established initial contact. India has set clear conditions for normalising relations, including a formal apology from the Prime Minister and written commitments to respect India's sovereignty. 6 cabinet ministers are reportedly urging immediate compliance with these demands, while others resist what they view as national humiliation. Former Prime Minister Tony Blair has allegedly reached out to Starmer directly, offering to serve as a special envoy to Delhi based on his personal relationship with Modi. At stake is not merely Britain's relationship with India, but its entire post-Brexit foreign policy and trade strategy. If Starmer mishandles this critical moment, the precedent of foreign governments bypassing normal diplomatic channels to work directly with the monarchy becomes established. A devastating reduction in prime ministerial authority. If he attempts to reassert control too forcefully, he risks antagonising Modi further and prolonging a crisis that damages British interests by the hour. Britain is witnessing a fundamental realignment of its place in the global order. This isn't merely another foreign policy challenge. It represents a profound national moment of truth about Britain's diminished international position. This crisis will be studied for generations as the moment that forced Britain to confront the reality of a multipolar world where former colonies now wield tremendous economic and diplomatic power. Not since the Suez crisis has a British government so catastrophically misjudged its actual global influence and leverage. At its epicenter stands Keir Starmer, increasingly isolated as traditional allies distance themselves, and public opinion hardens against his handling of foreign affairs. The man who promised to restore Britain's international reputation after Brexit now finds himself presiding over its most humiliating diplomatic failure in the modern era. So here's the question that truly matters. Is this diplomatic catastrophe with India a temporary crisis that skilled negotiation can resolve? Or does it reveal a fundamental reality about Britain's diminished global position? Did Starmer's government genuinely misunderstand modern India's sensitivity to perceived colonial attitudes? Or did systemic Foreign Office failures allow clear warning signs to go unheeded? Has the King's intervention saved Britain from even greater humiliation, or established a dangerous precedent for royal involvement in foreign policy? What do you think? Should Britain simply apologise to India and meet Modi's conditions? Or would such capitulation fatally undermine our international standing elsewhere? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this diplomatic meltdown shocked you as much as it shocked us, share this video with everyone who needs to understand what's really happening to Britain's place in the world. The mainstream media won't tell you the full story of how clearly India warned us before taking this drastic action, but we will. Next time, we'll reveal exclusive details about the emergency Commonwealth meetings happening right now, and the 5 other nations considering similar diplomatic action against Britain unless Starmer fundamentally changes course.